Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Retro TV Playhouse. I'm your host, Tabby, and we are wrapping up Western Month with The Big Valley, which ran on ABC from 1965 to 1969. And this will be a huge shock to you all, I'm sure, but this show is about a family running a giant ranch. Okay, so maybe Western Month ended up really being domestic, rich family Western Month. But I'm sure we'll circle back to Westerns at some point, and I'll cover Westerns with different premises. There's plenty of them out there, after all. But I was on a roll with Bonanza and the High Chaparral, so why not stick to the theme? Now, the Big Valley has something that Bonanza doesn't. Women. Yep, 2 of them. 2 whole women as main characters. What? You can't do that! But don't worry, we've got 3 main male characters to make up for it. Like Bonanza and the High Chaparral, the family in the Big Valley, the Barkley family, is somewhat of a blended family. And by that I mean there's one bastard child sired from the deceased patriarch who comes along looking to claim his birthright, and after some initial shock and denial, the rest of the family accepts him as one of their own, and he's never treated as anything less than the rest of them. I don't think I like this show quite as much as I like the High Chaparral. I think ultimately there were more misses than hits for me, and I dislike one of the main characters, but we'll get into that later. However, I do like it more than Bonanza. God, everyone's gonna hate me for not being that big of a fan of Bonanza. The show was produced by 4 Star Television Production and was created by A.I. Bezerides? I'm so sorry. And Louis F. Edelman. It was actually the last show produced for 4 Star. Bezerides... That can't be how you say it, can it? Anyway, Bezerides was born in Turkey, and his parents moved the family to the States when he was just 2 years old. He was raised in San Joaquin Valley, where the Big Valley is set. When he grew up, he earned a degree in electrical engineering. He wrote short stories on the side and submitted them to magazines. His 1938 novel, The Long Haul, was bought by Warner Brothers and turned into the film They Drive by Night, starring Humphrey Bogart. While he was working as a communications engineer for the city of Los Angeles, Warner Brothers offered him a screenwriting contract for $300 a week, and he jumped at the chance. His first produced screenplay was called Juke Girl, starring Ronald Reagan. Ugh. His most famous film is probably Kiss Me Deadly from 1955. With the popularity of television, he transitioned to that medium. He wrote for Tales of Wells Fargo, The Detectives, 77 Sunset Strip, Bonanza, and Barbara Stanwyck's self-titled short-lived anthology series. Probably had her in mind for the Big Valley. Although according to IMDb, he didn't actually write any episodes for the Big Valley, I guess he and Edelman just came up with the concept. Bezerides was married twice and had 3 children. He passed away in 2007 at age 98. Louis F. Edelman was a New Yorker. He graduated from Harvard and served in the Navy during World War I. He was the recipient of the Navy Cross after he rescued his crew from a torpedoed ship. A film produced called Submarine D1 was based on his time in the Navy. After the war and college, he moved to Hollywood and got a job with MGM. He was a writer, but his writing credits are scant. He was mainly a producer. He wrote just a couple of films, including uncredited work on the Bette Davis vehicle Jezebel. As a producer, he worked on movies like White Heat, G-Men, and You Were Never Lovelier. He had a successful television career as well, producing shows like The Joey Bishop Show, The Danny Thomas Show, The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, and The Barbara Stanwyck Show. Yeah, I'm guessing she was always going to be the lead in the Big Valley. Edelman was married once from 1933 until his passing in 1976 of heart disease. So the premise of this series is similar to Bonanza, this obscenely wealthy family dealing with the ins and outs of running their mega ranch while having domestic squabbles and various stock Western plots. The Barkley family is made up of matriarch Victoria Barkley, and having a female lead was a pretty big deal at the time. Aside from Annie Oakley, there were no other female-led Westerns. Okay, good on you, show. And not only that, she was an older woman. I think that's awesome. Oldest son Jared, a lawyer, middle son Nick, a hothead who takes charge of the day-to-day ranch work, only daughter Audra, an avid horse rider, and half-brother Heath, the brooding one. Once he is welcomed into the family, he co-runs the ranch with Nick. There's also a younger brother, Eugene, but he's only around for a handful of episodes in Season 1, as his character was said to be off at medical school. But then the actor Charles Briles was drafted into the military, and they just kind of never mentioned Eugene again. There's an episode late in the series where Victoria has this locket type thing with pictures of all 4 of her kids, and that includes Heath, who is not biologically hers, but not Eugene. He simply did not exist anymore. He is the Chuck Cunningham of this show. Around episode 4 or 5, everyone in the family is cool with Heath. He does still get shit from people outside the family, but they always stick up for him and make it clear that he is a Barkley and his place in the family is secure. You also frequently get people from Heath's past showing up for various reasons. As I said, the show stars Barbara Stanwyck as Victoria, who I'm sure you'll know was a huge film star in the golden age of Hollywood. Double Indemnity, Stella Dallas, Sorry Wrong Number, Christmas in Connecticut. She was in some stone cold classics. While she never won a competitive Oscar despite being a 4-time nominee, she did win an Emmy for her work as Victoria Barkley and was nominated 2 more times. She also won 2 other Emmys, one for The Barbara Stanwyck Show in 1961, and another for the miniseries The Thornbirds in 1983. She also received an honorary Oscar in 1982. At one point in the 40s, she was Hollywood's highest paid actress. Stanwyck was born in Brooklyn, New York. She was given the name Ruby Catherine Stevens. This is subjective, of course, but I think the name Ruby is way prettier than the name Barbara, but whatever. She was the youngest of 5 children. Sadly, her mother passed when she was only 4, and her father abandoned the family. She was raised by her older sister and in the foster care system. She got her start in show business as a dancer and chorus girl. From there, she made it to Broadway and scored her first leading role in 1927 in Burlesque. Not the Christina Aguilera movie, if anyone even remembers that exists. Anyway, a couple of years later, she made it to the big screen. And she was a pretty versatile actress. She could play the funny lead, the villainous femme fatale, the tough, sacrificial heroine. She was great, she really was. And like so many other actors, she transitioned to television. Remember in my Bonanza episode when David Dortort said that television would make its own stars? Well, it would, but they could borrow movie stars too. She was billed as Miss Barbara Stanwyck in the opening credits, and everyone called her Missy at her insistence. From what I've looked up, most people on the show loved and admired her. Except possibly Lee Majors. They may not have gotten along, but then I've read other places that he loved her and considered her a mentor, so unclear. Some bad news, Stanwyck was pro-House Un-American Activity Committee. Yeah. Her then-husband Robert Taylor was one of the only major players to actually name names. So that's pretty horrible, and I think worth mentioning. Stanwyck passed away in 1990 at age 82. Playing oldest son Jared was Richard Long. I instantly recognized him because he played Blandy McBroadshoulders in the Vincent Price classic The House on Haunted Hill, the first movie to ever make me scream out loud. I was like 7, leave me alone. Born in Chicago, Long didn't set out to be an actor. When he was in high school, he took a drama course because he wanted an easy credit. A film director saw him in a play and snatched him up for a screen test. Just out of high school, he was making his film debut with Orson Welles and Claudette Colbert. He was also in a few of the Ma and Pa Kettle films as one of their sons. He worked steadily in film and television for the rest of his life. He had a recurring role on Maverick, he starred in the one-season show Bourbon Street Beat, and he recurred on 77 Sunset Strip before being cast as Jared Barkley. After The Big Valley ended, he got the lead on another show, Nanny and the Professor. He had a somewhat difficult life. His first wife passed away from cancer only a year into their marriage, and his second marriage was troubled. There was at least one instance of his second wife accusing him of domestic violence. The two did have 3 children together. Long also suffered from ill health. He had a weakened heart after a bout of pneumonia when he was young, and he had multiple heart attacks starting in 1961. This ultimately killed him in 1974 when he was just 47. Middle son Nick was played by Peter Breck, and he had a weird family life as a child. His parents were divorced, and he was taken in by his jazz musician father while his brother was taken by their mother. And the brothers didn't see each other for 22 years. What in the Parent Trap is that bullshit? That's awful! Breck was mostly raised by his grandparents because his dad was on the road with his band so often. Anyway, before acting, Breck played professional basketball for a while and worked as a ranch hand. I guess that would serve him well later on. He studied drama while he was in college and started working in theater, film, and television by the late 50s. He was brought to Hollywood by Robert Mitchum after he was impressed by his performance in a play. Mitchum even loaned him his car when he first got to LA because he didn't have one of his own. He had some success in films like Shock Corridor, but his bread and butter was television. He had one short-lived series called Black Saddle, where he played a frontier lawyer. He guest starred on Sea Hunt, Hawaiian Eye, Maverick, The Outer Limits, Perry Mason, and Suspense Theater. After The Big Valley ended, he kept working in guest spots. He worked with Lee Majors again on his later shows $6 Million Man and The Fall Guy. He also did SWAT, Vegas, and The Dukes of Hazzard. He moved with his wife and son to Vancouver, where he opened up an acting academy. He also continued to work in theater. Tragically, his only child, Christopher, passed away in his late 20s after a battle with leukemia. Breck passed away in 2012 from complications from dementia. Only daughter Audra was played by Linda Evans. Evans was born in Hartford but raised in Hollywood. She was the middle of 3 daughters. Both her parents were professional dancers, and she initially took drama classes in school as a way to overcome her shyness. Her career started pretty quickly. She got her first television role on the show Bachelor Father in 1960 with John Forsythe, who of course would go on to star with her on Dynasty and become one of her close friends. She guest starred on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, Dr. Kildare, and Wagon Train before landing the role of Audra Barkley. After The Big Valley, she continued to guest star on television shows like Manicheck, McMillan and Wife, The Love Boat, and The Fall Guy with former co-star Lee Majors. Her biggest claim to fame was her starring role on Dynasty, a show that was created to compete with Dallas. And it worked. It ran for 9 seasons. Evans was married twice and briefly dated Lee Majors way after The Big Valley went off the air. And as of this recording, she is still alive. Finally, youngest half-brother Heath was played by Lee Majors. Oh, I don't really like this guy. If you've heard my Alias Smith and Jones podcast, you'll know that he had a real diva attitude when he guest starred on that series. And also, apparently, is the reason Farrah Fawcett left Charlie's Angels after just 1 season, despite it being a huge hit, and getting along great with her co-stars. But hey, what do I know? Maybe he's the best guy in the world. I've never met him. Majors was born in Michigan, and he too had a rough start. His father was killed before his birth, and his mother killed before he turned 2. He was taken in by an aunt and uncle, and the family moved to Kentucky. He was an athlete in high school and in college, but an injury halted his sports career. It was then he took an interest in acting. Why is this such a common story? He still hadn't given up on sports completely and aimed to be a football coach. And after graduating college, he moved out to LA. There, he was encouraged by an agent named Dick Clayton to pursue acting seriously. He only had a few credits to his name before his breakout role as Heath. And Majors was like the Michael Landon of the Big Valley, in that he went on to have 2 more successful television shows, The $6 Million Man in the 70s and The Fall Guy in the 80s. Now a major motion picture starring Ryan Gosling. He also produced and sang the theme song to The Fall Guy too, living up to that blonde Elvis Presley nickname. And yes, he did look like a blonde Elvis Presley. It's kind of uncanny. He's continued to work. He just had a recurring role on Ash vs. the Evil Dead a few years ago, and of course he has a cameo in the recent Fall Guy movie. Besides Farrah Fawcett, Major had 3 other wives. He has that in common with my stepdad. What a coincidence. But he has been with his 4th wife since 2002. Good for them. He has 4 children. Fun fact, he was up for the lead role in Midnight Cowboy but couldn't get out at the Big Valley to film it, so the role went to Jon Voight. And wouldn't that have been something? He might have become a movie star. As of this recording, Majors is still alive. Let's get to the characters. I like Victoria fine, but aside from her relationship with Audra, which I do find very warm, I don't necessarily buy her as a mother to the siblings. I don't know what it is, there's just a wall there. But she's a strong character, and she is not afraid to get her hands dirty. She's the first person to really reach out to Heath, and since she's the only one not actually related to him and his existence, meaning that her husband cheated on her, that was a pretty classy move. She treats him as her own and refers to him as her son, and he calls her mother like the other 3 do. Originally, Stanwyck wanted Heath to be Victoria's illegitimate son instead of her late husband, but the producers thought that was too far and that the audience wouldn't like her. I don't know. Certainly would have added another layer to their relationship. Mr. Barkley never knew about Heath, so technically he didn't abandon him. If he had been Victoria's, yeah, that would have been abandonment, and he would have every reason to resent her, and I think that could have made for a compelling story. But I guess America wasn't ready for that. Anyway, while her sons help her run the ranch, she's unquestionably in charge since her husband died. She's very protective of Audra, and some of the strongest episodes focus on just the two of them. They can take care of themselves and each other without the boys around, and I love those episodes. Next we have Jared. Remember when I said I didn't like one of the main characters? I meant Jared. Oh, how to describe Jared. Self-righteous, desperate to martyr himself for whatever cause will do it the fastest. He's a lawyer, so he handles the business end of the ranch, and he splits his time between home and his law office, and boy does he love his lost causes. And ordinarily this wouldn't be a bad thing, but I swear he just does it because he likes doing it. One of the episodes where somebody from Heath's past shows up, Heath wants nothing to do with the guy, and he's right to. This guy once left him and another young man to die. And what does Jared do? Stick up for the guy, of course. Without even getting his side of the story. All he knows is what Heath told him, and he's still like, yeah, but I think we should be nice to him anyway. It's just stuff like that happens over and over again with him. He just needs to be a contrarian. For attention? To feel superior? I don't know, and I'm certain he's not meant to come across that way. He's meant to be a righteous hero, but he's just so arrogant to me. Like the rest of the family, he's protective of Audra. He's most at home in a courtroom, but he can still handle ranch work and goes along on cattle drives and does all the dirty work that Nick and Heath do, if he has to. He got married once, but she got quickly fridged, and then he went on a killing rampage, and I can't tell you how little I cared. I will say that he fought on the side of the Union during the Civil War, and he reached out to Heath early on and stuck up for him when Nick was still unsure. Speaking of Nick, let's move on to him. Nick's got a temper, and it gets him into trouble. Frequently, the rest of the family has to try and calm him down. He was the last one to accept Heath as part of the family, but once he does, the two of them form a very close bond. And he's the first one ready to throw hands whenever anyone implies that Heath's not a real Barkley. They end up closer to each other than Nick is to Jared, and he grew up with Jared, but Nick and Heath are just very similar. Don't get me wrong, he's still close to Jared. It's kind of funny. I feel like Nick ends up being the glue that connects Heath and Jared. Like, Nick and Jared are close because they grew up together and have a shared history. Nick and Heath are close because of their similar interests and priorities. But Jared and Heath? I mean, they've got next to nothing in common. And this was before national sports was a thing, so they'd probably just end up talking about the weather over and over again for the rest of their lives. Back to Nick. He gets duped by women semi-regularly, too, thinking with his little head, you know? He seems to have the worst luck in love out of all the siblings. But he's a good foreman, he's also pretty funny, and I like Nick a lot. It can be annoying when he gets angry and jumps to conclusions, but he's a good guy and always makes it right when he messes up. He was also a Union soldier in the Civil War. We love to see it. Having said that, he still has his prejudices. There's an episode all about him treating a Romani family like dirt and learning a valuable lesson about bigotry. He's almost always wearing his black vest and black gloves. I don't know why that was his signature look, but he wears it well. Get it, Nick? He's definitely a fighter, getting into his fair share of brawls, and he's a fun character. He's maybe the most fun character out of the leads. Also, he beat rabies one time. Like, literally. I don't mean that they thought he had rabies and then it turned out he didn't. He straight up had rabies and then it just went away. You know, like rabies does. It's not even a big deal. And then we have lone daughter Audra, the one everyone protects. Audra is fearless. She rides horses, she smacks people around with her whip, and she's not afraid to fight. In the pilot episode, she tries to seduce Heath to prove that he's not really her brother, and obviously he was, so he quickly put a stop to that before it got weird. She's also not afraid to defend her family. She's very protective of her mother. Her go-to move, like I said earlier, is to start whipping people with a strap while she's on her horse. But if you can get past that master technique, you can take her down fairly easily. Sorry, girl. She also tends to attract some crazy suitors, which is unfortunate for her. She has a ton of spirit, and I love seeing a character like her in a Western from this time period. She has a fun relationship with Heath. They tease each other and play with each other and protect each other. I've told you the whole family really looks out for her, and there's a great episode near the end of season 1 where all the siblings are on a train and her appendix bursts, and the brothers do everything possible to save her. It's very sweet. Unfortunately, in the last couple of seasons, Audra is really a part-time character, and this is because Linda Evans got married and put her career on the back burner in favor of her marriage. That always makes me wonder, like, did she want to do that, or did her husband make her? Unclear. Either way, I think the show loses something without her presence. And finally, we have Heath, who is always credited in the show as just Heath. Apparently, this was to not give away the fact that he's a Barkley, but that cat's out of the bag in the pilot, so it seems kind of pointless to me. With how much I've already brought him up, you can probably already guess that he's my favorite character. He's broody, but, like, not overly so. He can have fun. He shows tremendous loyalty to his new family, and he has quite a colorful past. And like his brothers, he was a Union soldier in the Civil War, and he doesn't seem to harbor any prejudices. He starts out with a chip on his shoulder, which makes sense. He thought his biological dad abandoned him. But once he finds out that Thomas Barkley never knew about him, and the rest of the family take him in, he calms down, and he's fairly even-tempered after that. He's very noble, too. There's an episode where he encounters a man claiming to be his biological father, and throughout the episode, Heath comes to believe that he's telling the truth. So he tells the rest of the family about it and leaves, believing that if he's not a Barkley by blood, he has no right to be there. But by this time, the rest of the family loves him and tries to talk him out of it. They don't care if he's blood or not. He's one of them. He leaves anyway, and only comes back when the man admits that he's not really his father. It's a great episode and highlights his good qualities and the family's attachment to him. He grew up in poverty, so he deeply appreciates what he has now, and shows a lot of compassion to others. He's brave and tough, and I just love him. And, blonde Elvis is pretty cute, so I'm shallow. Anyway, let's move on to this episode, shall we? But first, I want to introduce my guest for today. My dad, the critically and commercially panned Vincent Opper. I asked him to join me because he's terribly old and remembers these beautiful shows from back when they first aired. Vince chose Season 1, Episode 10, The Murdered Party. This episode aired November 17th, 1965. It ran against Green Acres and The Dick Van Dyke Show on CBS, and Bob Hope Presents Chrysler Theater on NBC. And those were all new episodes. It was Green Acres' first season and The Dick Van Dyke Show's last season. The IMDb synopsis says, Jared agrees to defend a murder suspect despite the fact that Heath witnessed the killing. The case involves the defense of a man from a reviled family and the death of a respected benefactor. The Murdered Party was written by Jack Curtis. I couldn't find much information about him except that he was a novelist after a little over a decade of writing for television, and his novels were mostly Western. That makes sense because a lot of his television work was Westerns. His first credit was an episode of the Zane Grey Theater in 1959. He went on to work on Rawhide, The Westerner, The Rifleman, Gunsmoke, Wagon Train, and Nichols, among others. The only non-Westerns he wrote for were Ben Casey, 12 O'Clock High, Run for Your Life, and Targets, The Corruptors. He wrote 3 episodes of The Big Valley, and one of them was the aforementioned Nick Learns a Lesson About Not Being a Dick to Romani People episode. Curtis passed away in 2002. The episode was directed by Virgil W. Vogel. Vogel was born in Peoria, Illinois, a city my church group allowed me to run around by myself in after dark at age 13. In hindsight, maybe that wasn't the most responsible thing in the world to do. Anyway, enough about my traumatic childhood. Vogel started his career as an editor. He edited films like Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man, Ma and Pa Kettle at Waikiki, A Touch of Evil, and A Touch of Evil is a great movie, you guys. You should all watch it. He then became a director, and his first movie was The Mole People. I love it. He also did another Ma and Pa Kettle movie, The Kettles on Old MacDonald's Farm. He directed a ton of television, from Laramie all the way up to Walker, Texas Ranger. He did several episodes of The Streets of San Francisco, The Young Riders, Wagon Train, and The FBI. And he did a grand total of 48 episodes of The Big Valley. And this episode was his first one of the series. He was married twice. His first wife sadly passed away after 19 years of marriage, and they had 2 children together. His second wife he was only married to for a year before his own death in 1996 from pulmonary disease. With all that out of the way, Dad, what did you think of this episode before we dig into the details? Alright, so first impressions.
It brought back memories. I do not remember this particular episode, but I did like it. And my first impression was it was almost like watching it for the first time because it's been 45 years since I watched it. Um, I I I guess I didn't realize how kind of mousy a little bit that Lee Majors was in this. His character Heath.
Oh, interesting.
And I had also forgotten how almost I don't want to say kind of doofy that the other brother Nick was. So,
Oh!
so that's
Slandering Nick and Heath right off the bat.
I did remember Jared being rather smug. That brought back memories. And in this episode, Victoria wasn't quite as domineering as she was what I remember.
That's fair. I think that's fair to say.
But I'm sure that's just because this episode didn't really have a whole lot to do with her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Audra is kind of a, I don't know, I don't like her character.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so when did you first watch this show?
I was probably about 11, 12. My sister would watch TV when we got home from school, and it came on from like 4 to 5 every day. All the reruns would. So I kind of watched it because she was watching it, and I probably didn't pay attention to it for the first few times, and then one day I just started paying attention and thought, oh, this is pretty good, because I wasn't really into westerns. I did watch Wagon Train when I was a kid, but as far as other westerns, no. So it was pretty good.
Yeah, that's what surprised me when you said you used to watch this show, because you were like definitely not a western guy.
No.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because I first watched this show about 2 years ago, so it's fresher in my mind than it is in yours. You disliked Heath and Nick, kind of, and I have in my notes about 30 times how much I hate Jared. So that's interesting.
I'm not saying I like Jared. I just remember him being smug, and I'm not saying I didn't like the other two. It's just their characters. I had first of all, I barely remembered Nick. I don't remember him being central in many of these things, and I did remember that Heath came in as a bastard child, for lack of a better term.
Illegitimate. But I called him a bastard earlier,
yeah,
it's fine.
And of course, Heath was Lee Majors, and at the time, the $6 Million Man was popular, so I was more paying attention to his character, and Jared's character was much more interesting. And then Nick, who I guess just kind of runs the farm.
And gets angry.
Yeah, yeah. He just seems like, gosh, I didn't get the best part of the DNA. I guess you can put it that way.
But he always looks super cool with his black vest and his black gloves. He's always dressed like that.
I guess that's super cool to some people.
Okay,
to me, he just looked like a big hot-headed oaf. But
he is that. But I don't know. I like Nick. But fair enough. So I was watching it because I watched it twice, and I suppose I should start out being totally fair to Jared. It didn't look like Heath saw the actual stabbing, because he had to round a corner, and then he saw the guy on the ground, you know? So he didn't see the actual stabbing. Am I right, or is that what you saw?
I thought he saw the character with the knife and then leave.
Okay.
Not. I don't know if he saw the actual stabbing, but he did see the end of it, I guess you can say. He did see the character run away, and so he chased him.
Yes.
And I guess we'll get into what character that is.
Yes. All right. So I said the brief IMDb synopsis, but Heath is in town, and he sees the murder of a very respected man named something Ashby. Colonel. Yes, his first name is Colonel Ashby. And he thinks, or he saw a man named Corby Kyles, played by Warren Oates, commit the crime. And so he catches him. So we pick up, I guess, a few weeks later, or however long the inquiry took, and they've decided to bring murder charges to him. and Corby's family, who the whole town hates, I guess, because they're just criminals and bad people, come and they beg Jared, who's a lawyer, to take Corby's case because no other lawyer in town will do it. And he acts like he's not going to do it, but I think he was always going to do it.
Yeah, he made the statement, there's a reason, don't you think there's a reason they've turned this down? And and the patriarch of the Kyle's family says, yeah, they don't like us just because they don't like us. And I like how at first he tries to appeal to our families came to this valley together.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the similarities between the two families end right there.
Probably.
But he was reaching, Jared, help. We have roots to go back. And, Jared's like, at the beginning, he's like, well, there's a reason these other lawyers aren't taking it. And then he proceeds to insult Heath because Heath is the bastard child. To which Nick has one of his 3 lines in the whole episode. When, I don't know what he said. Rude tootin', don't say that, or something like that.
That was the line, yeah.
Yeah. So I liked how they set it up. And it's this episode is over 50 years old now. I think.
Yes.
Okay, so close to 60 years old. Gosh, it is 60 years old. It started at 65.
65.
It is
oh my god.
59 years old.
You are right. It was season 1, so you're right.
So it's very... automatically you see the stereotypes. We are the successful ranching family who do things right, and I'm a lawyer, and we are, this great family, and for heaven's sakes, our mother is Barbara Stanwyck, I'm not going to beat that. And you guys are poor white trash. And they never use the term poor white trash, but a lot of the stereotypes of poor white trash that are still around today, they kind of throw that into the family. So I kind of thought, boy, in today's world, maybe they would make it so obviously an upper class that is successful, they have to be right, versus this lower class white trash family. Maybe they would have softened that a little bit, but this was the 60s, and that's how it was like. If you had money, you were successful, you obviously were going to have the benefit of doubts. Whereas if you were struggling people, and according to Jared and the family, the Barkley family, it's not that they were just struggling, they were just lazy. So it kind of feeds into that stereotype. I'm thinking, in today's world, they would have softened that a bit.
Yeah, I definitely noticed with all 3 of the shows that I've covered for Western Month that, this is very much about the virtuous wealthy, how they're rich, but they're such good people, and the poor people, maybe not so much. They're just criminals and drifters, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
I know. I just don't think we would portray the uber wealthy the same way today.
No.
Yeah. Here's my first I hate you, Jared. So, I understand he's not saying he thinks Heath is lying, just that Heath is wrong. And I guess it bothers me why he's so quick to think, yeah, maybe he was wrong. Because he has been testifying at this inquiry. He says that at the beginning. Why is he so quick to think that, oh, well, he could have been wrong? Do you think he was right to take the case, is what I'm asking?
I think he was right to take the case because I do feel like that they should have had legal representation. And at that time, you don't have a public defender, and so he's going to hang, so...
True.
So someone had to step up to the plate and defend him, and I think that that's all that Jared was saying at the beginning is nobody's defending him. He at least deserves a fair trial. So I think that was the motivation behind taking it, and I think when he started looking at it, he you know, said to Heath, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying it's possible you didn't see it correctly.
I do think it was admirable that he told him not to hold back because of him, though.
Yeah.
You know, that if I'm wrong, you can prove it that I'm wrong.
Yeah, and he didn't seem to have a problem with that.
No, it was the rest of the family that had a problem with it.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to jump ahead too much, but when he does visit Corby in jail, and he's saying I didn't do it, and you know, and he and Jared are not. I mean, they're both being snarky to each other, prickly to each other. It did, and I like Warren Oates as an actor. He's a good character actor.
Sure.
To me, he did a good job of making it look like I might be popping this off the top of my head. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I wasn't quite so convinced of his story, and I don't think Jared at that point was quite so convinced of his story, but it was like, okay, he does have a story. I'll look into it. And when he starts looking into it, he thinks there may be something here.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I can see that. I thought it was, but the whole family is this way. When he first went to visit him, why Corby was just so hostile right away instead of, you know, buttering him up and, you know, asking him for help. He starts out just being like, "Oh, get out of here. You're just like the rest of them," you know. It's only when Jared says, "Oh, I was gonna see if I could help you," then he's like, no, wait, here's what really happened, you know. I'm like, I don't think you should be that hostile right off the bat. No one else is standing up for you.
Well, at that time, he didn't know why he was coming.
Fair.
And his half brother had already in the inquiry already said his side of the story. So he looked at him as, okay, that's a member of the family that's after me. So
sure, yeah.
It probably didn't even cross his mind, unless you read the script. Probably didn't even cross his mind that he's coming here to defend me.
I mean, Warren Oates probably read the script before they started shooting. You know, that's what I would do personally.
Personally, yeah.
But I don't know what his method was. Oh yes, the newspaper scene where he's telling the reporter, I guess, that the article is prejudicial, which, okay, it is. But if it's factual, it does say that he's been charged previously with assault with a deadly weapon. And, you know, that's a lot different than petty thievery and things that the family's been accused of in the past. I don't think it's a huge jump to say you would go to murder from assault with a deadly weapon, you know?
Yeah. And talking about I cannot speak today. Prejudicial. When he's telling him the story, and he brings in this new character, he calls him a name.
Oh, yeah.
In the 60s was still not looked at as racial. Today, you don't say that, and that's the seaman word for this Asian guy.
Yeah, that popped out at me too, because they say it a lot.
Yeah,
in the episode, I'm like, whoa, all right.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's not the same thing, but it's akin to using the N word or something like that,
mm-hmm.
and it's a racial slur, and they just fling it like it's
like it's nothing. Yeah.
Here we go.
Right.
So, anyway, let's proceed.
Okay. The next scene with I know you said you don't like Audra, and okay, the next scene with Jared and Audra, I really didn't like how he treated her. It was very much condescending, I thought, treating her like a little girl.
Yeah.
She's making these arguments. He's like, "Oh, you don't worry about that," and honey, don't, like, just calling her honey and stuff like that. And I'm just like, you're not taking her seriously at all. And I think she has a legitimate grievance. Granted, the orphanage subplot has nothing to do with the actual case, but she has a right to be annoyed about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was kind of expecting her to burst into song and sing that Gwen Stefani song, "I'm Just a Girl," when he was, "It's okay."
Right? I'm like, oh, Jared. Yep, there's my second one. Jared, you suck. Oh man, I don't like him. Oh yeah, you saying that well, I guess you were both saying that Nick is so hot-headed. He took that one-on-one scene with Jared a lot better than I thought he would, because he's thrown hands before, like when he's mad at his brothers. So I'm like, oh, you're taking that very well for him, you know. There's another episode where, and I actually can't blame Jared for this one, this whole ruse happens so they can basically get a former Civil War general to confess to taking part in plotting the assassination of Lincoln. And Nick gets caught up in it. And when it turns out to have all been for that, and Jared knew about it, yeah, he knocks him down pretty good, which, I don't know. I shouldn't like Nick, but something about me does. And you just kind of think he's a useless redneck.
No, I did not say that. I'm just saying he's hot-headed. He is.
Yes.
I know a family, and one son was a doctor, and the other son didn't go to, after high school, he went straight into construction. They're just two different people. It's hard to see that they came from the same family, because one was so goal-oriented with higher education and wanted to become a physician, and the other is like, nope, done with school, gonna go build things. And that kind of reminded me of the dynamic of this family, and I'm sure that they are not going to listen to this podcast. So,
oh, the family you're
yeah.
I was gonna say the Barkley family's dead.
So well,
Mostly.
so is the physician in this family. He passed away.
Bummer.
So, but yeah, both of them are nice guys, just kind of two different people. So,
yeah, I did think it was interesting that he had a private scene with all three of them, aside from Heath, all asking him not to do this, basically. And I don't know, I feel like maybe this is just my bias against Jared, because I don't like him, not just this episode, the whole series. I don't like Jared.
He's just a know-it-all jerk.
Yeah.
He's arrogant.
Yeah, I just feel like that fuels him more, like, ooh, they don't want me. I'm going to prove them all wrong, you know? I'm going to show that I'm better than them. And I don't know. You have notes. Does your say, you have anything I haven't brought up yet while we're about at the halfway point?
Not yet. I think we've covered everything that I was going to talk about. I just found it, from my recollection of watching it when I was little, I just found it very strange that Victoria is really not a factor in this, because she seemed to be such a factor when I was growing up watching this in just about every episode. And in this one, she's just like, please don't take this case, and let's have supper.
She is a factor in most episodes. I grant you that. There's a lot of episodes that really focus on her. Episodes where she's the only member of the family who appears, or it's just her and Audra. And yeah, this one she definitely takes a back seat. But I think she kind of respects, except Audra, the boys' autonomy as adults, because there's another episode where there's like a forest fire that's going to come down into the valley, and the three guys decide to go up and try and help. And at first she's like going to ride into town and tell them to stop, but then she stops herself and she goes, well, I can't do that, they're adults, which is very surprising to me that she said that. And that was kind of the last of her in that episode too. When he's talking with Victoria, and he's talking about how he's going to take the case no matter what, and he says, that really puts me in the middle. And I'm like, no, you put yourself in the middle. And he does that so many times. And you're right, the guy deserves fair representation, but I'm just like, why does it have to be you? Can't you, he has connections, because he works in San Francisco too. Can't you find a lawyer? Oh, okay, so now we're at the beating scene. When the Kyles get onto their property somehow and beat up Heath. And you really think he's mousy?
Yeah, he's
quiet.
He's laid back.
Yeah.
You know, it's I'm comparing him to my much better memories of the $6 Million Man, where he was an alpha male.
Okay, I've never seen that show, so I'll trust you.
That's why he seems kind of mousy in comparison. I wouldn't say he was completely mousy. I mean, he does try to stop the murder. He tries to catch the perpetrator. He gets beat up, which I'm surprised after he got beat up. If I'm Jared and my half brother's been beat up by people I'm representing, I would have said, "Screw you! You blew it."
That was my thing too. And he's like, "Well, he's not responsible for what his family does." I'm like, really? I feel like now's the time to quit. But that's when he officially announces, "Nope, I'm taking this case." Because before he's telling everybody, "No, I'm just thinking about it," you know? And that upset me too. I'm like, well, don't you have any sympathy for what's happened here, you know?
Yeah.
And not only what happened to Heath, but they threatened everybody.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And on the Kyle's part, that was kind of stupid, you know, to threaten the family of the one lawyer who's interested in helping you.
Yeah, they don't come across as they're not smart. They don't have ambition. They are just, even when the house is, I mean, they might as well have had a horse on 4 blocks, you know, with no legs. They really played into the white trash stereotype, especially at the house.
Yeah, when the brothers or whatever had the nerve to actually rob Jared then and there, I'm like, what are you doing? If this was anybody but stubborn, arrogant Jared, they would drop your case, you know? You just stole from him right then and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that really kind of puts, not that because, you know, I watch a lot of true crime shows, and I don't really take the parents of the suspect word very seriously, because they're the parents, they're biased. But it really kind of makes him extra unreliable when he's like, "See, you're accusing my sons of stealing. They would never do such a thing." And then he just proves that he did, and he's like, "Well, that has nothing to do with, but my other son really didn't kill that guy." It's like, why would we listen to you now?
Yeah.
So, I don't think we've really explained the orphan plot. So, Colonel Ashby's widow was giving or leasing land to build a new orphanage, and Audra was really involved with that project. Well, now Mrs. Ashby is understandably upset that Jared is now representing her husband's killer, so she takes that back. Do you think that should have been a factor for Jared's decision, or is that not really fair to put on him?
I don't think it's fair to put on him. When I went through my divorce, the person who represented my ex-wife's case was the brother of a good friend of mine. And he explained to me, he said he's just doing his job. I said, I realize that. No big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you hire a lawyer, there should be some detachment from the people. It shouldn't be a personal thing against the lawyer for taking a case that you may be involved in, because we do all deserve legal representation.
Mm-hmm.
And the wheels of justice just won't work if there's not legal representation, because then you can just accuse and execute, or accuse and punish.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't appear that he was going to have any legal representation, so Jared stepped up to the plate. And I think if I'm the lady, okay, the husband got killed and everything, I know the emotions and everything in it, that would be kind of separate from leasing land for an orphanage. Who are you punishing? The orphans.
That's fair.
You know?
I mean, what does Jared care? I mean, he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Audra," but he probably doesn't really care that much. You know, it's these, like you said, it is the kids that are going to suffer, and they have nothing to do with any of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of petty, and I guess lends credence to the fact that Colonel Ashby maybe wasn't the best guy after all.
Ooh. Stay tuned.
Right, because that's Corby's story, that he was, what was he doing? Was he embezzling or something? I can't remember what he was doing, Ashby.
Ashby he had an opium ring going.
Opium, that's what it was. Okay.
And he had made enemies. He wasn't the respected citizen that they all thought he was.
Right.
He wasn't he was a community leader. it's like the John Gotti thing. The people in John Gotti's neighborhood loved him because he did the fireworks show and looked out for the people, and the streets were safe and so on and so forth. So they overlooked the fact that he was a gangster and he had people put to death at will and just
right.
So all this information about the colonel was going to spill out into the opening court.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I guess, one of the things that some of the people, like the newspaper man, they didn't want that name smeared.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I don't have a problem with that because it's the truth, you know.
Yeah.
I know he's dead now, but so what? You should still. I think it's fair to know who someone really is.
yeah.
So this has nothing to do with the story, but was that editing annoying you in the trial when they would call a witness and the camera would do that zoop? Did you notice that?
I noticed it, but I guess I've seen it so many times.
Oh, it just seemed like you haven't been doing this all episode. You can't pull out, attention-seeking editing now, but that's just a minor quibble. Alright, so they finally call Heath to the stand. Now, obviously, because it's a TV and we need to see what's going on, the area was very well lit in the beginning, so you can see what's going on. So Jared's whole assertion of it was too dark, you couldn't have seen it, is a lie.
Well, a lie, but it did get into he's like, maybe, I don't know. So.
That's the one part that bothered me. I'm like, Heath, stick to your convictions. But on the other hand, you do want to be sure before you convict somebody, I guess.
Yeah.
And, of course, Nick had to stand up and interrupt the trial for a moment, because he does that every time there's a trial. I'm serious. I don't know why they keep letting him in the courtroom. And then they get their surprise witness. And what happens with the surprise witness? Go ahead and tell the good people.
Do we want to talk about Corby's testimony first?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Because Corby's testimony comes before the surprise witness.
You're right.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, Corby's comes across as belligerent while he's being questioned.
Mm-hmm.
But he, in the line of questioning, he spills the beans about the colonel and says his story. And I think he believes he's going to get off. And I believe that he's going to get off too.
Oh, the cat disagrees with you.
Now, I thought that while Corby was on the stand, I thought that they did a good job of portraying him as belligerent, but kind of convincing of what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't suddenly become someone who he wasn't. He was still this belligerent, for lack of a better term, rednecky guy, and he tells a story, spills the beans about the colonel, and kind of shifts everything to like reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So
sure. No, I didn't research what law was like in this time because I do have other things to do with my time, believe it or not. But I assume this was probably before lawyers encouraged their clients not to take the stand. I see that a lot in murder trials. They don't want their clients on the stand because they don't want them cross-examined.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this was before that. Yeah, reasonable doubt, but the town is so against him. Do you think that would have been enough for them? Like for a jury? Because nowadays you would move the trial to a different jurisdiction.
If there's one that they could convince that there's reasonable doubt, if it ended right there and I was on the jury, I would have, I can't 100% say that he's guilty.
That he's guilty. That's fair. Yeah, I guess that's fair. Now the surprise witness that the defense calls. So apparently there was another person who saw the killing that night, and he very, very clearly, from the light of the train, saw that it was Corby who killed Colonel Ashby. Now, were you surprised that he turned out to be really guilty, or did you expect that?
I was surprised he turned out to be really guilty. I thought it was a good twist. Um, and I liked how before he even said anything, Corby's like freaking out, like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, that guy can't take the stand."
Right.
So I thought, "Oh my gosh, there's going to be a pretty good twist coming here." So, and from just a perspective of these characters, I was glad that Jared lost.
See, definitely from the perspective of characters, I'm glad Jared was wrong because I like seeing Jared eat crow. But I also thought, here, I have this written down. I feel like this could have been an episode with maybe something more to say, like that you can't judge someone based on their family, based on their, status. A rush to judgment is bad. Just because someone is a criminal doesn't automatically make them a murderer. Everyone does indeed deserve a fair trial. But then he's guilty anyway, so never mind all of that. You should judge somebody based on all of that because they are guilty.
Yes.
So I'm glad Jared lost, but on the other hand, I'm like, I feel like maybe it would have said more if he had been innocent. So I'm kind of mixed on the ending.
Yeah, I can see that, but it was... The episode was so trending towards the end that he's going to get off and
Yeah.
he's innocent, that I kind of like the last minute swerve. No, he really is guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Haha, we got you.
Yeah, I love the slow realization on Jared's face as the witness keeps talking.
Yeah.
And Corby's like, can you make him shut up?
Yeah.
That was pretty funny. And then he tries to run at the end because he's stupid, I guess. So then we come to the end scene. I understand, but I was not all for the family just being like, oh, don't worry about it. Let's have dinner at 10 o'clock at night. We probably made our black servants stay up so we could have this moment.
Yeah, I know there are families that sweep everything under the rug. They never talk about anything controversial or anything, but that's not this family.
Mm-hmm.
Until the very end when it's like, forget it. You didn't really lose. We didn't really win. Let's just eat like it never happened.
Maybe they thought he'd already been humiliated in front of everybody and that he didn't need more from them. I don't know.
So yeah, I just wanted Heath to say, ha!
Right? Suck it. But I did think it was at least big of Jared to come down and say, okay, I messed up. I made a mistake. At least there was that.
See, I don't even think he made a mistake. I think he just represented somebody who needed representation. That's his job.
Yeah. Yeah.
You when you're a lawyer, it's not like you take a client based upon anything more than what they tell you.
Mm-hmm.
You can't assume this one's guilty or this one's not guilty. This one's guilty, so I don't want to take it. This one's not guilty, so I'll take that one. You go into it thinking, I'm going to take what my client says at face value.
Mm-hmm.
They say they're innocent, even though 34 people saw them shoot 8 people public square, then they're innocent. That's my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that was very representative of a lawyer to be taking jobs based upon whether or not you think someone is guilty or innocent. That really shouldn't enter into it. But I did not like the ending. I did not like them just let's eat, because food solves everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's been sitting out for 3 hours apparently. So let's hope the meat's not rancid.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think they should have said then? If you're right that Jared didn't make a mistake, I mean, what could be said?
I think it could have ended with Jared coming in and he's shaking his hands. I know you were just doing your job.
Okay,
and
that's fair.
you did it admirably. But we're a family. We can't let this split us apart. Even though I'm not like full blood family like you. That would have been more appropriate what this family would have said. But to just sweep it under the rug is not. It's not the Barkley way.
No, I would agree with that. They normally don't do that. Perhaps, and obviously this isn't really true because TV was so episodic back then, but in my headcanon, perhaps, since this was only the 10th episode that aired, so maybe Heath was still so new there, he felt like he couldn't really rock the boat. Maybe they'd change their mind and kick him out, you know? I don't think they would ever do that, but
Yeah,
maybe he's like, oh, I'll just go along with it, it's fine.
yeah. You want to explain, for people who are not familiar with the show, how Heath got there and why we keep calling him the bastard child and stuff like that?
I explained it in my intro.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But the pilot episode, he shows up at the ranch. He gets a job as a hired hand. And I think Nick finds out he was using a fake name or something, so he confronts him. He says, "Who are you?" And the exact line is, "Your father's bastard child." And they're all like, "What? Say again?" You know? Because his mother had just died, and I believe right before she died, she told him who his father was. So that's why he came to the ranch looking for, you know, what is rightfully his, in fairness to him. But I noted this in my intro too, and I just think it's funny that they credit him in the opening as just Heath, not Heath Barkley. Like, it's not a surprise after the pilot, you guys. You can stop doing that.
It's like Johnny Quest, you know. Johnny Quest, race band, and Dr. Quest. Haji!
Yeah.
Now, the bigger picture about Westerns during this time period, you got like Bonanza, you got Big Valley. What is it with these men on ranches who just don't get married or anything like that?
Oh, I talked about this in the Bonanza episode. That is one of the reasons Pernell Roberts was so unhappy on the show and why he left after 6th season. That they're like, these aren't children, these are adults. You need to let them grow up, you know? They don't need to run everything they do by their all-knowing father. They need to live their own lives. They need to get married and start families and move out of the same house that they all live in together, you know? So, you're not the only one who's thought of that.
Yeah.
Pernell Roberts was like, they're grown-ups, you know? So
I know on Bonanza, they were really angry that Michael Landon went off and married a lady and moved to the prairie. Yeah, that really upset Pa and Haas. Yeah. So overall, you like the episode? I did like the episode.
I'm glad. Yeah.
I did. I did not remember the episode. I don't know if I've seen that one before. It didn't stand out, but I liked it. And I really liked the antagonist family in particular. I like Warren Oates. I think he always gives a good character performance, and he was semi-likable in that there's a part of everybody who just wants to thumb their nose at a portion of society, no matter where you're at. You know, there's you know, even the most powerful, popular people in the world, you know, there's this little rebel in each one of us that wants to thumb our nose, and I kind of liked how he was like that. Mm-hmm. We found out at the end he was guilty. It was all lying, but you know, he was kind of thumbing his nose at authority. You know. Yeah,
I like the episode a lot too. It's one of the ones that stands out for me when I watched the show a few years ago, because I watched it all pretty quickly, and that was always one that I thought about even when I was like in season 4. I was thinking back to that episode. There is an episode, speaking of marriages, where Jared gets married, she gets shot, and he goes out... By
Nick?
Yes, by Nick. And he goes out on a vengeance rampage all in one episode. And at the very end, her face is superimposed in the fireplace, and it's hilarious.
So she's in hell?
I guess so. Man!
Yeah, she wasn't as sweet as you thought, was she, Jared?
That's right. Yeah, that episode,
Did that
I'm
episode
like, oh, stop it.
Oh, she didn't die. She's just not here. Let's have supper, okay?
Right.
And never talk about this again.
Right, it's like, no, we're going to pretend that Jared didn't disappear for 3 months on a quest to murder this man, in the name of vengeance. Let's have supper. Well, that is it for the Big Valley, and that is it for Western Month. I will be back in September with Cop Show Month, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. Sure, we're gonna have some Starsky and Hutch.
We
maybe?
sure are.
Yeah.
Of course we are. Do any other cop shows matter?
Cop Rock.
You know what? That's fair. Those are the only two. All right.
All right.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me on.
No
You're still
problem.
in the will.
Oh, that's so good to know.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.